Welcome, get in here. We're taking it through Kalos today as we play Pokemon X and Y as the developers intended. It's a long-standing series here on the channel where I make a point of playing the Pokemon games correctly, and that's in heavy quotes. So, what does that mean? Well, primarily it means taking advantage of any obvious tools the game gives us to solve the challenges that it poses. In Pokemon Gen 6, you can bet that means catching Poison and Steel Pokemon to tackle the prevalent new Fairy type, among other things. It also means planning for quests and content before they come up where possible, such as catching Pokemon to offer in NPC trades before meeting the NPC who asks for it. And lastly, and perhaps most interestingly about doing these runs in the Pokemon franchise, is how I build my team in a way that feature maxes all the new mechanics and balance changes every game makes. In fact, this time I'm gonna do something different and tell y'all up front the entire list of mechanics that I did my best to squeeze on the team. If you ever wanted to try crafting a Mothy style team, try taking this list and see what you can come up with. In approximate priority for Generation 6, the features I'm trying to include on my team are Mega Evolutions, obviously, the new Fairy type, Poison or Steel Pokemon to counter the new Fairy type, Sky Battles, Horde Encounters, free gift Pokemon, because you won't find a clearer developer hint than them literally handing you a Pokemon, trade evolutions that we're able to catch in single player, version exclusives, Pokemon that are strategic counters to specific tough battles, previous generation Pokemon who got their base stats buffed, NPC trades, Pokemon who fulfill random small quests, and don't forget we need Fly and Surf and Waterfall. The other HMs too, but these are the ones we need to plan for. And I'll tell you right now, Sky Battles are the toughest thing on this list to solve for. So let's get started on a run of Pokemon Y version and see if we can beat the game with the team that highlights most of these goals. And if you enjoy this kind of content, do please subscribe to the channel because that helps me remain able to produce these videos for y'all. Thank you. Starting out, as usual, we have a choice between a pretty girl in a cute outfit or a hideous dork boy wearing Magic the Gathering clothes who's in need of a haircut. But I have good news. For the first time in the franchise, Pokemon X and Y let us customize our player appearance as we play. We get to work on our visual progression, and starting as the boy gives, more room to improve. Of course, I changed my text speed to fast immediately, then it also lets us pick a lower screen wallpaper without previewing them. I have no idea what these are gonna look like. Nice job, Game Freak. So I settle on Pokeballs and never bother changing it, which does turn out to be a fine decision once I behold them in battle. For all the experimentation the franchise does in other ways, selecting our starter Pokemon from the same 3 types with the same 3-stage evolution is feeling kind of formulaic by now. I chose a Chespin mostly through process of elimination, which I'll reveal more about later on. Basically, there's stiff competition for all 3 of these types on our team, but I found the Sky Battle puzzle only works out nicely if I grab a Chespin right now. This is Peon Kennedy, and he immediately knows a same-type attack, which rules, but he doesn't learn another until level 26. It's immediately clear that Gen 6 had a goal of suppressing power levels, but then they proceed to give us that power back in other ways. It kind of synergizes, but it's weird. We'll get to it. Amazingly, we're allowed to buy Pokeballs and even catch a Pokemon if we wanted to before the catching tutorial. That's cool, but I'm not in a particular rush. It's at our leisure to make a couple of catches before hitting the 3rd town. First, I nab a Bunnelby on Route 2 for a coming NPC trade, then once inside Santaloon Forest, I begin hunting for a Fletchling to add to the team. I mentioned Sky Battles being tricky. Pokemon X and Y introduced battles that can only be participated in by certain flying and levitating Pokemon species, and they start happening before Gym 2. You need a flying Pokemon in the early game in order to fully experience this game's content. Unfortunately, a lot of the early options for that suck because they're bugs like Vivillon who get decimated by the other flying Pokemon you'll face in Sky Battles. The exhaustive list of early catchable flyers who don't have this problem is Zubat, Ew, Drifblim, and Fletchling, which is why Fennekin was not in the running as my starter Pokemon. My first catch here had a bad nature because Fletchling doesn't really need help on its speed, and it does want help on its attack. So I try again, but Monique isn't a waste. We'll let a lonely old man raise her later. Meet Michael Wave, who takes a few levels to learn Peck, but he accelerates into helping against early trainers pretty fast, and he's able to run Sky Battles as soon as he evolves. So, our duo clears up to Santaloon City where I'm able to change out of my jacket and track pants, but I'm devastated to learn there's no way to remove my hat. Gross. Since we can't go bareheaded, it's going to be my goal all game to find the least ugly hat. I discover an excellent quality of life feature when I go to trade my Bunnelby for this man's Farfetch'd. Gen 6 allows me to select trade Pokemon straight out of my PC. Many times on this channel, I've had to do PC box fiddling round trips just to perform NPC trades, so I'm glad that's gone. They still don't let me accept gift Pokemon with a full party, though. Actually, was Emerald version the only game that did? I guess Game Freak decided convenience is their enemy. Well, this far-fetched Quacklin is actually kind of great. He comes with Aerial Ace, and he demolished the first gym alone, not to mention he is a strong Sky Battler. But I do want to try and play with the Gen 6 Pokemon when possible, and I like the fire typing on Microwave, so Quacklin does not dethrone him for me. Now, before we fight the bug gym, I was able to clear out part of Route 22 for the XP. I found X and Y version much more restrictive than previous games on letting us play ahead, but there are still a few small areas like this that we can power up on ahead of time before returning to advance the story. Now, there's only one new species catchable here, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. Gen 6 introduced very few new Pokemon, the fewest ever. I'm not here to yap about that one way or the other. In short, I'd say it's not bad in response to Gen 5 adding the most ever. But I bring it up because for the first time in this series, I'm not requiring my team to be entirely composed of new gen Pokemon. There are just so few new ones that I couldn't by any stretch of definitions pretend that playing that way is sanctioned by the devs. But at minimum, for every team that I sketched out for this run, I did make sure that I ran at least 3 new Pokemon on it to stay curious about the new batch. Anyway, we're given a pair of rollerblades as we're admitted to Santaloon's bug-type gym. Microwave has Peck by now to easily handle the place, and against Viola, I spent one of the X attacks they hand us in the trainer school, since those do feel recommended for use here. After winning that badge, hallelujah! Earning that stocked the Pokemarts with Repel, which I proceed to spend most of my money on. Tragically, Pokemon X and Y got worse with bag organization. There's no way to register repels or favorite them to a separate pocket, but at least the UI itself is more responsive with button presses and scrolling than it has been in the last couple generations. Viola's sister hands us the XP share as we leave town on Route 4, which I'm sure many of you are awaiting my judgment on eagerly. But I don't have that much to say about it. It pumps a lot of extra experience into your party, and it starts enabled, so I do keep it that way, except for a modest stretch in the mid-game when my party level felt way ahead of enemy trainer levels, so I gave it a brief pause. My feelings are that Pokemon X and Y are at once very slow games, pacing-wise, and that the battles were designed on purpose to feel easy. Keeping my party ahead of the level curve, thanks to the XP share, claws back some of that speed while also complementing the slow rollout of level-up attack moves. Suddenly it makes sense why Quilladin doesn't get Needle Arm until level 26. Route 4 is interesting. They actually allow us to catch Flabébé if we want to dive headfirst into the new Fairy type. It's a big shift from Gen 2, which introduced Dark and Steel types, but then Gate kept them hard outside of Magnemite's incidental Steel typing until the late and post-game. Because of its early accessibility, I flirted with the idea of running Flabébé on a few teams. A bunch of new Fairy types are fake, the way Pinsir was only kind of a bug Pokemon until Gen 4. Flabébé is not like that, it learns Fairy Wind and Moonblast. But this team is actually going to fill up fast, so I'm mitigating that by holding off on catching our Fairy type. I do rustle up 3 hidden honeys that I have to find intuitively without a dowsing machine yet, because those help us trigger horde encounters, which we do want, but later. One of Professor Sycamore's assistants hands us a return TM as we arrive in Lumiose City. The recent Pokemon games have been good about handing this out early so we can watch it grow in power. And then we're admitted to the worst area I have ever had the displeasure of experiencing in a video game ever. Not an exaggeration. Back in Gen 5, I had mused that Castelia City felt a bit overwhelming after the heavily linear early games, but that was only a trial run for Lumiose, which is magnitudes worse. Right now, we only have access to maybe 20% of the city, but that's still more than I enjoyed. It wouldn't be the worst place if the perspective was 2D, or if the camera would at least stay still from a top-down angle. But the confusing layout combined with fighting the camera, I feared every time this game made me interact with Lumiose City, which was several times. For now, we meet Professor Sycamore in person and get to battling him, which is Microwave's trigger to evolve and now be eligible for Sky Battles. Then we get to claim a Kanto starter Pokemon as a gift, and as one of the very few Mega Evolvers, there's no denying that this gift is meant to stay on the team long term. Charizard does make a compelling Sky Battler, but it only evolves and becomes eligible after we'll have missed several of them. Venusaur with some TM'd poison moves is an excellent Fairy Eater, though I have another poison type penciled in, which is why this choice has to be a Squirtle I named Zorbux, and now in the context of Zorbux and Microwave, that is why we had my starter be the Grass type. Okay, one of Sycamore's scientists hands out False Swipe, which I don't take advantage of myself, but I love how sensible it is to pass this out in the early game. I feel like False Swipe usually gets gatekept pretty late, after the player already has better balls anyway and more status moves to help with catches. Then we meet eventual villain Lysander, and we're turned loose on Lumiose City South with our friends shepherding us to some of the local attractions. I create a PR video for myself with Shauna because that's weirdly the trigger to allow changing our eye color, and because participating in all of the city's amenities contributes to an invisible stylishness score that gates other amenities. The Poke Center here offers 2 interesting TMs for sale, Bulldoze and very early Swords Dance, but I'm not quite in range to afford either, and getting my hair dyed for $3,000 isn't helping. But with that done, here we are. With my hair and eye color fixed, I'm finally able to represent myself in the game. Unironically, the starting appearance options looking nothing like me gave me some sympathy for underrepresented people in games. In this cafe, a hiker gives out a decent prize for snapping 15 photographs at scenic spots throughout the game, but an even better prize for doing just 1. Hold on, I passed by the first photo spot in Aquacord. Let me just run down there and... boom, wide lens, an item that I'm on record as really liking. I like that it fixes all the rock moves that for some reason got shafted on accuracy, but it also turns Hyper Beam and Fire Blast into reliable weapons too. I collect a ton of fancy Pokeballs from random NPCs, which has become typical for the series to do in the early towns. We used to have to trade single apricorns and wait a whole day for these kids. Then, my final stop in the city for now is Restaurant Lana, which is really just a creatively presented couple of trainer fights for extra experience and cash. These fights got Peon wanting to evolve, but I'm holding off so I can nab Pin Missile 2 levels early. Many early generation moves got buffed in damage or accuracy, in Pin Missile's case both, to bring them in line with current design philosophy. After 5 generations of Pin Missile sucking too much to use, it's downright good in Gen 6, and Chespin at level 18 is the best way of getting to enjoy it before it gets outclassed. And with that, we're done with Lumiose City Part 1. As we head out on Route 5, a man called Mr. Bonding grants us our first 2 O powers, a new system that I enjoyed using quite a lot. In X and Y, we have an outside of combat energy meter quickly regenerating that we can spend on different temporary powers that we learn throughout the game by meeting this man in different towns. I was rather big on the prize money power while playing the Battle Chateau, stay tuned, but I loved using the battle powers too, which queued up a stat boost for the next Pokemon you send into battle, whenever that may be. It's like an X attack or dire hit that doesn't waste your turn. They are seriously overpowered, enabling sweeps for Pokemon who were never meant to pull off sweeps. And they're also fun. If I knew a boss fight was coming, and I'd be okay as long as their first Pokemon didn't manage to Thunder Wave me, I could queue up an attack boosting O-Power and hope that makes the difference in letting me take them out before I get paralyzed, for example. Pokemon X and Y almost entirely threw away triple and rotation battles from Gen 5, aside from some special endgame challenge fights, and that's a shame. I especially miss rotation battles, but it does still include a nice diet of double battles, this one getting Peon to level 18 for Pin Missile and therefore evolving. Then it's time to expand the team. One Pokemon who feels pretty mascot-y for Generation 6 is Furfrou. They're all over the place as NPCs, and there's a few buildings in Lumiose centered around just Furfrous. So I hunted for a while, and then the first one I encounter and catch has a perfect nature. Say hello to Walrider. He's an interesting take on the normal type. His fur coat ability, having physical damage received, makes him an excellent tank, and his special defense is pretty good too. The problem is his learn set. I have return for him, but Furfrou doesn't really learn anything else offensively besides Headbutt. At least I was smart enough to catch him in a luxury ball. And of course, we've got to get Walrider a fur cut, so I sneak back to Lumiose and pay for one. That totally should have healed him. Come on, Game Freak. Back on Route 5, our friends Tierno and Trevor introduced the idea of Horde encounters. These can be a quick way to train EVs, not that Gen 6 needs that with super training, but they also give you a 5% chance to find a Pokemon with its hidden ability. Hold that thought though, the Horde Pokemon I'm targeting comes a few routes later. We find our first hotel in Camphor Town. I visit every hotel throughout the land as we go, cause it's usually where Mr. Bonding is giving out new O-Powers, but there's also 2 wandering hotel NPCs who will make trades with us after we've encountered them several times, over several days. One is a maid who accepts any Pokemon for her Eevee, and the other is a fisherman who accepts our Gyarados for his Magikarp. I will state now that I didn't film my game over enough IRL days to get a chance to make these trades, so I won't get to evaluate them, but with both species catchable on their own much more easily, they wouldn't score very well. Berry growing is back in a big way with an entire farm we can grow. It's closer than ever to being a feature I love rather than despise, but it's just fundamentally way too slow, both in terms of menus and button presses, and in terms of real time, and the payoff isn't enough to be worth the pain. I could fix the system so fast too, just give us a way to cash in berries for BP to spend on rare TMs and held items and I would be the best berry farmer ever. But there's no reason to interact with berry farming without some payoff aside from the berries themselves. Anyway, To clear a Snorlax out of the way, we need to detour to the Parfum Palace. Route 6 leading there has a really neat design with a broad central path that's flanked by 2 parallel optional paths holding loot and most of the trainers. This is something Gen 6 got very correct with its design. It finally acknowledges trainer battles as something desirable that the player would seek out rather than some annoying roadblock they expect players to do everything they can to rush past. I wish more of the game had this philosophy. Zorbux evolves here, not from one of these trainers though, but from an Audino who jumped out at me from the bushes. I'm not going to say no to that XP. And Walrider fainted in a juicy double battle where I really wanted him to get that XP because the enemy Furfrou cheated and used Tail Whip on my team 1 level before it should know Tail Whip. That stung. Then the Parfum Palace is just straight up Versailles. Get the amulet coin here, which is critically important for affording clothing since clothes are way expensive throughout the game. And unfortunately, HMs are back in a big way after Gen 5 had de-emphasized them, starting with getting cut right here. At least we don't need Flash in X and Y, but in exchange for that, Rock Smash is an honorary HM that we'll want to keep around all game too once we get that. And while I'm being critical, Pokemon X and Y definitely made some mistakes with trainer levels. It's something we've seen before in Gen 5, where some trainers off of Route 14, who were gated by Waterfall, had Pokemon levels in line with the rest of the trainers on Route 14 who don't need Waterfall to access. So by the time we could actually fight them, their teams were way underpowered. It's something Gen 4 was really careful not to mess up for what it's worth. If there was a single trainer you needed a rock climb to come back and fight on an earlier route, best believe his team had rock climbing levels. But now that we can cut, if we return to Route 5, the cut gated trainer here is only level 10 like his peers on the non-cut parts of Route 5 were. Call it a nitpick if you must, but I'm right. There's 2 more waterfall gated trainers on Route 22 that this game messes up in a more obvious way. Clearly, a different person designs these fights than who places them, and nobody bothers testing it. Well, Cut does also get a sharp beak for Microwave. X and Y is generous with strong held items. It's another way they bridge the power gap in the slower level up learn sets. One thing I really like about Gen 6 so far are flower patches. They're just different grass that allow for different encounter odds within the same route. It's a nice way to help you catch a certain species you're hunting for, and I also like the implications of the differing odds for Nuzlocke. Okay, there's a group double battle with 3 of our friends outside the Battle Chateau, and I wish we got several more of these throughout the game, but we don't. They're a fun way to make use of the larger cast of characters that this game includes through our friend group. And then we're at the Battle Chateau, an area that dictated much of my entire run. Perhaps a third of my total playtime was invested in the Battle Chateau. I revisited this place again and again as I progressed through the game in order to rank up at a pace that made sense alongside my campaign progress. The Chateau is basically an on-tap source of bonus battles, especially oriented toward prize money since everyone here gives out a lot of it. Add in the amulet coin, and often the prize money O-Power too, I was addicted to this place in order to fuel my clothing shopping habit. But like how I handled Join Avenue in my Black and White 2 video, I'm not going to call out, and then I did the Battle Chateau again, throughout this video, but know that I did come back here pretty often to farm money. The experience is less of the point because enemy levels here taper off to a median of like 20, which doesn't help much by the mid-game, but it would still sometimes help me get the first level or 2 on new Pokemon that I add to the team later as I brought them up to speed. I did end up reaching Duke rank in the Chateau by the end of my run, but not Grand Duke because that requires a lot of real time to pass and some RNG to get all the opponents. From here, it's through the connecting cave onto Route 8, which is beautiful, and it's basically a brag on Game Freak's use of 3D modeling. This looks good. Here we can find our first Sky Battle, which I didn't. I didn't find it because it's literally hidden, but by now is when you should have a confident flying Pokemon on your team. This is also where I want to catch my Horde-encountered Pokemon, Seviper, except one simply jumps out at the grass at me on its own, and I caught that one before I ever had to mess with Honey and Hordes. We could catch Seviper in a Horde, but I actually don't need one with its hidden abilities, so that works out fine for me. I will say I was really hoping for one with a speed plus nature. Seviper's not a fast Pokemon, but a lot of the species in this game are pretty slow, so I figured with a good nature and some EV training I could raise a snake to win most speed contests. Well, this is Poisson, whose nature boosts her attack instead, but that's on top of her excellent attack IV and maxed speed IV. This will do fine. In a nutshell, Seviper is what I like best about Gen 6. A Pokemon who's been around for a while, but never very strong, is suddenly not only usable, but great. I had actually nicknamed this team Seviper's Big Day on my team planning document because it's finally her turn in the big leagues after playing in Little League for 3 generations. But yeah, Sevipers are a horde encounter option and would have been even better demonstrated if I was playing X version where they're exclusive to hordes. Okay, in Ambret Town we gain Rock Smash, that goes on Wall Rider, then investigate a big dead end about fossils hoping to learn about Mega Evolution. We're sent down the slow, clunky Route 9 on a slow, clunky Rhyhorn, and this is where I get in my first Sky Battle. These are weird. You have to step on the right tile to discover them, and sometimes your opponent is far away off screen or up on a cliff, so they're literally hidden fights sometimes. Game Freak apparently wanted Sky Battles to be fun little secrets half of the time. I only ever had one Pokemon with me who was eligible for Sky Battles, which is fine when there's only one opponent, and while you don't have a type disadvantage. But some of the later Sky Battles that involve multiple opponents became too difficult. God help you if Beedrill is your Sky Battler. Glittering Cave switches to a unique over-the-shoulder camera and plays out a little bit like a dungeon crawler almost. This is super neat, I just wish it wasn't full of unavoidable wild Pokemon encounters. Between the Pokemon jumping out of bushes, Pokemon dropping from ceilings in the caves, and burrowing Pokemon we'll see on Route 13, Pokemon X and Y is clearly designed to disregard or disrespect our repels in many ways. And just so we can get the repel saltiness out of the way all at once, X and Y also do a crappy thing that Generations 2 and 3 were bad at, which is that none of the roads are maintained. There are no unbroken paths from city to city. Instead, every route is crisscrossed with dinky little 4-wide grass and flower patches that always seem to trigger a fight, unless you're spamming repels just to cross these little miniature grass patches. It all just feels like a bunch of extra friction that Generation 6 reintroduced on purpose after Generation 5 felt delightfully smooth to, actually play. I could unkindly conclude that Pokemon X and Y are designed to waste the player's time with these extra encounters, but I would hope that the design choice came more from a place of just wanting to invent new methods of encounters that weren't tall grass. And then for some reason they decided those methods should ignore repels. In conclusion, the game is slow, and I'll be honest that my choice to leave the XP share on and have all my battles become too easy was definitely in part a result of how overworld navigation was so aggravating. I felt like I had to reclaim some of my time. Well, you can find Old Amber from rocks in here to raise an Aerodactyl, and that's also one of the rare few Pokemon who get a Mega Evolution before the post-game. And as a rock type, it's very well positioned against other flyers in Sky Battles. So back to my note on those. If you're only going to raise a single Pokemon for Sky Battles, definitely make it Aerodactyl. It's not a big deal to backtrack for the 2 Sky Battles that you will have missed by the time you get a chance to revive one. Then, as we're introduced to Team Flare, this is a good time to point out that it's been a long time since getting our first badge. The gap between badges 1 and 2 in Pokemon X and Y is the biggest intra-badge gap in the series so far. I guess the Flannery lead up in Gen 3 is big too, but then these 2 have a huge gap above any other gaps. Cause my team is almost full and we still have another route to go before reaching the town with the gym. But the silver lining of delaying the second badge so long is that it gets to feel like an actual challenge. The second gym is something we might even need to prepare for. It's not still stuck in tutorial mode like you could say of some of the second gyms in some of the games, Lenora, Gardenia. But it does mean we still can't buy super repels. I know, dead horse, moving on. On lower Route 8, we're given the Dowsing Rod. It's much less fun to use than Generation 5's, but it's still much better than Generations 1 through 4 hidden item finders, so I'm content. Heart scales are at a premium in this game, so don't miss the ones down here, but aside from those, hidden items aren't very good in this game, and you actually won't miss too much by ignoring the Dowsing Rod entirely. It's a big shift from Generation 5, which spammed hidden vitamins and PP ups. And I do go fishing here for a love disc for a trade. Cute little weird thing. Silage City, y'all are gonna be mad at me for how I say that, but it's French, finally hosts our second gym to challenge, after we complete some errands, of course. We're able to fight a few trainers ahead on Route 10, where I experienced my first, honest-to-goodness, poison-type does-something moment, taking down a Skiploom and a fairy-type Azumarill with Poisson. It's nice feeling the sunshine on a type that's been downtrodden for so long. Back in the Silage Poke Center, we can trade Love Disc for a Steelix named Thumper, who's carefully placed to counter the coming gym. Very well, in fact. A defense plus nature on top of her ultra-high defense, and Gyro Ball to hit the gym's rock types strongly is quite a weapon. But I brought my own tank. Wall Rider should do fine in a similar role, and I am trying to use the new Pokemon where possible. The clothing shop here sells me several more outfit pieces, and I changed into a New Orleans kind of thing to go with my eyes. Then we're finally ready to challenge the gym, hours and hours since our last. Walrider should have no trouble tanking Grant's Tyrant, who only knows physical attacks. My concern is how I'm going to hit back, and also not take too much damage from Amora first. I go in with an attack O-Power and Rock Smash, hoping to quickly knock this thing down with 4x effectiveness, and just barely miss the one-hit KO, suffering a Thunder Wave. That's what I get for not spending the one protein I had found. Then I lost a chunk of HP finishing off Amora after the heal, and had a terrible bad luck streak of paralysis that denied me Tyrant. The Walrider strat has failed. It's Poisson who has to come in and save the day, paying back the paralysis with a glare, then she efficiently takes me home with Bulldoze, and pushes me even further into fangirling Seviper. What can't she do? This victory puts Super Repels up for sale, thankfully, so I dip into the Clothing Money Trust Fund to grab a ton of those. Then we're able to use Strength, which nets Aerial Ace for Microwave, who's been stuck on just Peck for a while, and it also nicely opens up a shortcut back to the Battle Chateau. Once we're ready to advance, it's back up Route 10 for some Team Flare fights, and I guess it's time to touch on Pokémon Ami. For all the tutorializing these games love to do, I'm amazed they never shoved Ami down my throat. They just let me discover it when I'm ready. I'm realizing that people don't mean over-tutorialized when they say that Gen 6 is easy. That's a different concept that comes later. It's pretty simple to pet and feed all your Pokemon using Ami to the point of getting serious battle benefits. Level 2 affection gets them bonus XP, which I have covered through the XP share, but levels 3 and 4 will win you fights that you had no business winning. The most efficient way of boosting your affection is to just leave the Pokemon Ami playroom open as we play, and some of y'all might be mad that I basically never do this, but I found the entire system to kind of be at odds with O-Powers. They're both out-of-combat ways to strengthen your team that make the game much easier, and they require your attention on the bottom screen in order to min-max. It's just weird to me that both of these systems got implemented in the same game. It feels like a manager didn't know how to say no to one of their team members, so both of them got greenlit. I did play with Poisson a bit in Ami because we love her, but otherwise I arbitrarily chose to focus on O-Powers instead of Pokemon Ami as the thing that I used my bottom screen for. As far as super training, I did spend a solid hour running through all the tutorials and unlocking the upper level trainings just so I could grab some extra speed EVs for Poisson, because a fast snake is an alive snake. I think in a world where the game was more difficult, Mothy would have had a fun time half ironically pointing out how the optimal play is to grind up max affection and super train each of your Pokemon as soon as you catch them. But as it is, Pokemon X and Y just don't require that kind of effort. We'll be fine. Okay, Poisson with Bulldoze handles Corona's 2 Lucarios up in Geosenge Town. This can be a tougher fight that's worth planning for if you don't have an unbeatable Seviper. Then it's on to Route 11, Miroir Way, and I love how all the routes got common names in addition to their numbers in this game. If you live in the country, you know every road is like this. County Road 30 will be also known as Chapel Hill Road or whatever. Here, I want to call out Nidorina and Nidorino as 2 previous Gen Pokemon who got meaningful stat boosts for Gen 6. These 2 had their attack cranked up by 10 points each to keep up with newer Pokemon who generally have higher base stat totals. So did Poliwrath and Beedrill, and then Butterfree, Clefable, and Wigglytuff had their special attacks go up by 10. It's a mechanic I wanted to spotlight, but with all these buffed Pokemon being by definition old species, I just couldn't find room to include them on the team. Then the game's final boss is here. I'm kidding, but it's a really unfair sky battle. I'll go so far as to call it poorly designed. This one trainer has 3 Pokemon and leads with Emolga, who on its own is a huge problem against most Pokemon that you could be using for sky battles. And then Wingull happens to punish a wounded Microwave pretty well too. I'm not kidding when I say that this is the toughest fight in the entire game. I can conclude one of 2 things from it. That Game Freak intended for us to run 2 or more flying Pokemon on our team, or that sky battles simply weren't thought through very well or tested. And given the other issues I found with this game's balance, I'm inclined to conclude the latter. Okay, well, Reflection Cave does a good job giving us access to some more fairy types in Mr. Mime and Carbink, and I guess I'm using this as a chance to say that the new fairy type is excellently designed in my opinion. Not only does it give poison and steel types a job that they badly needed, but it fixes one of the longest running complaints with the entire Pokemon franchise that I've had, and that's the requirement to run a fast Ice Beam user just to handle late game dragon bosses. Ice Beam was basically just another HM you were supposed to run. But the Fairy type has finally displaced Dragon type from the pedestal that it's been on since series creation, simply by giving them another weakness. We still have a Dragon trainer in the Elite Four in this game, because old habits die hard, but having 2 ways to handle dragons up from 1 makes all the difference. Shellor City sells me Dig and Poison Jab TMs for Poisson, which are huge offensive gains. Then we meet the Mega Evolution Guru, and we're forced to battle Serena for the single Mega Ring that he has to give out. Despite running the XP share all game long, Serena's levels are pretty tight with ours here. It's not a bad fight. And Shellor City has a gym too. Having waited so long for the second gym, the remaining 6 now come in relatively compressed window. Poisson continues to perform strongly against the fighting trainers in here, but when it comes time to fight Corona, Michael Wave gets his chance to shine, now evolved to Talonflame. Aerial Ace sweeps her in just 3 turns after the initial fakeout. Then, in an awkward ceremony, Corona finally hands over that Mega Ring, and one of her Lucarios forces itself onto our team, sending us into battle using it against her other one. Lucario is feeling like Liara from Mass Effect. It's like the developers decided what our favorite character is supposed to be, and they keep shoving it down our throats for us. And I'm the type of personality to respond the opposite way. It makes me dislike the thing even more. To the PC with you! Serena hands us Surf as we leave on Route 12, which, like in Gen 2, is a pretty big power spike for the team after how careful they've been with TM power levels through now. We're given a gift to Lapras in case we need someone to surf with, but of course Zorbux is our guy for that. But before surfing to clear out the Azure Bay trainers, I rush to the far end of the route where I can easily farm rock smashes to hunt for our 6th party member. Longtime viewers know I rarely duplicate types on a team, but I'm breaking that rule now to run a Binacle alongside Zorbux. His name is Rock. With 2 water HMs required, but plenty of other cool moves these Pokemon could learn besides, especially Barbaracle, I decided that running 2 water Pokemon as real team members was better than running only 1 water Pokemon as an HM slave, which in a sense is kind of like running 0 water Pokemon. There have always been way too many water types anyway, so this is me making peace with that and allowing myself to experience more of the Pokédex. I will probably generally be open to running 2 water types on my team going forward, especially if they're dual types. But here's what I did dumb. I thought waiting to catch Rock until Route 12 made sense, because he comes at a higher level here than if I had caught one back on Route 8. But that is ignorant of the XP share. By catching him only now, Rock is even farther behind the party level than if I had just caught him back then and let him get shared experience. Oops. We're given Ampharocyte here, and Mareeps are catchable locally to take advantage, but this is one Mega that never got serious consideration for the team. But it does learn Eerie Impulse, which completes one of those random NPC quests for like a single revive in Lumio City, so there's that. Ahead in Coumarine City, a fisherman gives out a good rod, which would allow us to catch the version-exclusive Skrelp. It's a compelling poison option, but it does kind of eat both Blastoise and Venusaur's lunch, so it might be long on a whole separate Charizard-centric team. The girl in the hotel here hands out the Lucky Egg, which I'm actually glad, because of the XP share, is not game warping the way that it was in Gen 5. Before, I was neurotically swapping it around to min-max XP gain for big fights, but Gen 6 saves me from myself. I really don't mean it as a joke when I say this is a good thing. Then, this city of course sustains another gym to challenge very soon after the last one, and it's guarded by another Serena fight, also pretty soon after the last one. This game flies by after you beat Grant. The Grass-type gym gives Poisson even more opportunities to feel ultra strong, then we finally unlock Fly, which feels a little bit late coming this generation. It's been a while since I've hit the Battle Chateau or visited my berry farm, but most importantly, I've been eager to revisit the clothing shops across the land because their stock rotates daily. Fly finally lets me hit up the outlets. Now it's time to tackle the Power Plant dungeon off of Route 13, which is ultimately going to unlock more of Lumiose City. I'd almost rather not help. The desert on the way there is miserable to navigate with grind rails for navigation, strong winds blowing us around, and repel ignoring Pokemon encounters. Actually, one of these caused Peon Kennedy to evolve into Chestnut because I wasn't allowed to flee and had to kill my way out. And thus, I actually used my starter Pokemon in its final form on this run. It's a happy side effect of the pretty small regional Pokédex. The Power Plant dungeon itself is quick and pleasant, just a ring of Team Flare grunts to beat up. One hostage employee of the power plant finally sells fresh waters, which have been a staple of these videos going back to Gen 1 because of their top-notch healing to price ratio. But purchasing them one by one from this man is extra slow, and we do win lots of cash from the Battle Chateau that we can blow bulk purchasing real potions, so this is the first game that I was cured of the need to stockpile water. So again, we run into a strange way that Generation 6 cures my neurotic play patterns simply by providing abundant resources. No change is done in a vacuum. The Team Flare leadership in the power plant is far from a challenge, only having 1 Pokemon apiece, and then we're heading back to Lumiose City Part 2. With the power turned back on, the Lumiose gym is open for challenging, but the entire rest of the city can be explored first, so clear your schedule and get in a good mindset. You'll be here for hours. Look, this Furfrou peed in the hotel. The biggest attraction for me on our Lumiose City revisit is that we can shop at the fancy clothing store if our stylishness is high enough. So I did things first like ride a go-goat, take a taxi, and work a job at the Hotel Richisime. But the most effective way by far to max out our stylishness is to sit in the ball emporium and buy premier balls one by one, since our style gets incremented every time we make a purchase here. Also pretty cool that we can directly acquire premier balls for once. And as a side note, I had stopped filming this game around now so I could get a different video produced and uploaded, and you can't do that. Not during Lumiose City. You will not remember where you left off. I had a meal at restaurant Le Ya, which I was pleased to discover is a rare source of triple battles, so they're not totally wiped away, just confined to an optional daily place. Rock evolved during one of these fights into Barbarical, getting a stat boost, but his moveset still isn't good. I've had him maining Rock Tomb. He could relearn Stone Edge as of evolving to fix that, but the move relearner is pretty far off, sadly. Well, my style points are high enough now to get Walrider a fancier haircut. I had the dandy style in mind for him since catching, and now he looks really nice next to Peon in my overlay. And the clothing store finally admits me, where I'm immediately revealed as poor, despite having farmed up 150k in the chateau. Clothing items are not cheap in the rest of the stores, but in here, they're the price of a house. So for now, I contented myself with a fedora, which may be cringe, but it's still so much better looking than the dumb square caps. Then finally, multiple hours after having arrived at Lumiose, and on a different day of filming entirely, I'm ready to take on the 5th gym, with my team levels in the low 40s. And you know what? This gym saved me from yet another weird behavior that I've always felt the need to do in previous games. Failing quizzes for extra battles was always the right move before now, as good sources of XP and cash. But in Pokemon Y, I have fast, unlimited ways of earning both through the Chateau. I don't need to do this. Pokemon X and Y removed the incentive for failing gym quizzes on purpose, and that's pretty cool. My team is unfortunately pretty soft against Clement, the consequence of running 2 water types. But Peon Kennedy with his electric resistance gets to make a good showing here, contributing properly for once instead of just coming along from the ride. A lot of his levels are just from the XP share. Then with Clement defeated, I'm relieved to finally be done with Lumiose City, at least until the postgame. We get another Serena fight as we start Route 14, where her starter Pokemon is fully evolved, so I mog her with Mega Zorbucks. Route 14 brings a pretty visual change from the rest of the game, which had been all bright green and sunny, but it also brings back the awful deep swamp mechanic from Gen 4. Someone at Game Freak really said, let's make this game miserable on purpose. At least the route isn't long, and we're soon in Laver City for yet another gym. These really do come back to back. In Laver, I bought many more clothes and was finally able to assemble something that I would consider an outfit. It has truly been fun, gradually improving our appearance throughout the game alongside the development of the Pokemon team. I sadly box Walrider at this point. You may have been wondering where our fairy Pokemon is, and the time to catch it is coming. Also, another small reveal. The reason that pushed me to keep my starter Pokemon on this run was that alongside our Kanto gift starter, we actually get the chance to play with the Pledge combo moves in single player, and they've even been buffed. I tutor Grass Pledge and Water Pledge onto my team here and started keeping an eye out for double battles to test them out. I know it's not going to be strong, but I wanted to see the pretty animations one time. Then, gym time? Poisson with her Poison Jab gets yet another chance to dominate in here, though when it comes to Valerie, I brought in Microwave to handle her Fairy Steel-type Mawile. Fairy Steel is the new Steel, defensively speaking, and I will not be elaborating. But the Snake obliterates Valerie's other 2 Pokemon to earn a very easy 6th badge and the Dazzling Gleam TM necessary for making several of the game's new fairies into proper attackers. The Pokeball Factory Small Dungeon is next with its fun conveyor belt mechanic. The boss fight here is an ally battle with Serena against a mere 2 opponents. O-Powers and XP share aside, this game really didn't bother making the fights tough except for that one Sky battle. They should have blanket added 2 Pokemon to every single rival, gym leader, and Flare admin fight, and the game would have been more fun. Then we receive a Master Ball, blah blah blah, it's time to catch our fairy Pokemon. Well, technically in the Lost Hotel, not on Route 15 itself, cause the encounter rate is better there. I'm looking for a Klefki. No, we're not doing this. I want a solo encounter one so it's not too far down in levels. I ended up catching Chobits, the speed-boosted Klefki who immediately gets Dazzling Gleam. And I love this thing. I always enjoy running wall strategies in these games, and Klefki holding leftovers is resilient to most opponents. The Prankster ability lets me sneak in high-priority Thunder Waves, which does have some cool synergy in double battles when I want a slow partner to preempt the opponent, and high-priority Rain Dance can even protect her against fire opponents, though that never came up. Like Terrakion last game, Klefki quickly became a new favorite Pokemon for me because on top of being super strong, it's cute and weird. And I don't really want to weigh in on Pokemon designs, because nothing in Gen 6 feels too far gone, but I find designs like Klefki and Aegislash less un-Pokemon-like than merged Kyurem was, or even Mega Evolutions in their entirety. Both of those ideas borrow much heavier from Digimon. I'm not mad at a few Pokemon just looking like objects. Okay, it's time for Dawndomil Town, where Sycamore and his aide teach us about our box legend Yveltal, who sounds straight up evil, like Kyurem. It just kills Pokemon to stay hibernating as a replacement effect when it would leave the battlefield. Dawndomil finally hosts our move deleter and rememberers pretty late in this game compared to Gen 5, and I have been eagerly awaiting the relearner. Talonflame can relearn Flare Blitz and Brave Bird as soon as it evolves, but Microwave has been stuck maining Acrobatics with no held item for a while. There's several other relearns I want to do, including Hammer Arm on Peon and Stone Edge for Rock, but I use my second of 2 heart skills on Shell Smash for Rock, since Stone Edge will also come as a level up move and as a TM, just unfortunately not soon on both counts. Well, Route 17 is blocked until we clear out the Frost Cavern, but the optional Route 16 calls to me even before that. I got a chance here to pull off the Pledge combo moves in a double battle, and ew. So it spends both Pokemon's turns, doesn't go off until the slower one acts, and only hits one opponent. I know there's cute lingering effects too, but it's too bad this game's double battles only ever have 2 opponents, so battles never last long enough to care. A fisherman hands out the Super Rod, which enables me to directly fish up a Gyarados for that Magikarp trade that never does materialize, but it also unlocks Politoed a few areas later. One day I'll catch one of those, I promise. Then we're ready for the Frost Cavern, the game's biggest dungeon aside from the very large Victory Road. There's some light Team Flare involvement at the end, but this whole place feels kinda shoehorned in, like the game realized we're getting toward the end of it and have barely had any dungeons in between the back-to-back gym fights. For rescuing a beleaguered Abomasnow, it hands us its missable Megastone, and what? The entirety of the available Mega Pokemon list in this game is Venusaur, Charizard, Blastoise, Lucario, Aerodactyl, Ampharos, and randomly this, which is exactly why I decided to play with one. Out on Route 17, after the Frost Cavern, I went hunting for a Snover. Meet Le Triangle, who's gonna replace Peon as our grass type. This thing has been awful as a result of its countless type weaknesses and slow speed ever since it was introduced in Generation 4. It was never justifiable to play with one, so I guess it got a Mega Evolution just to make it more enticing? Or they were going alphabetical, which is why we also got Ampharos and Aerodactyl, and Absol later. Anyway, it's weird that Game Freak put Mega Abomasnow in, which is what made me insist on raising one. For the rest of the playthrough, I'm going to be trying to fit an Abomasnow-shaped peg into every hole, and checking if it has some hidden place in the metagame that I'm not seeing. Anastar City has a rival fight where I tried to debut Le Triangle against Jolteon, expecting to be resistant, but a single off-type double kick almost kills me while my Limp Blizzard hits back for less than half. I do love spamming full accuracy blizzards thanks to his automatic hail, but they're gonna need to hit harder than this. Evolving should help with that. A woman in the Anastar Poké Center gives out 4 TMs if you visit her over 4 days in different time slots. Luckily, her biggest time window, and at the most convenient time of day, yields Flamethrower. This is an amazing pickup for Poisson, giving her a counter to Steel types, which could otherwise be a challenge for her. The gym in town hosts Psychic types that I didn't pack an explicit counter for, but many of them are dual-typed and easy to punish in various ways, like using rocks against Jinx. Against the later Olympia, Rock leads with Shell Smash and then just sweeps her entire team with X Scissor. In a world without Stone Edge or even Rock Slide, Barbaracle turns into a weird coverage Pokemon through TMs. I am glad a Shell Smash strategy got to pay off at least once for me. On a low-level run without as much XP share help, I think I would get much more mileage out of it. Okay, with 7 badges down, it's time for the typical huge evil team chapter that we get around now in each Pokemon game. Ours is located in an elaborate spinning tile dungeon underneath the Lysander Cafe in Lumiose City. The dungeon kicks off with a boss fight against Lysander himself, where his Gyarados could pose a problem for my team that didn't bother packing electric moves, except it only knows physical attacks, so an Iron Defense Zorbux lets me tank with ease despite having no good counterattacks. Iron Defense is exactly the kind of cool move that you don't get to run on your Blastoise if it's your only water Pokemon. I trot out Mega Abomasnow in here a few times, who reminds me of the old one from Demon Souls. Even though he typically scores one-shots with Woodhammer or Blizzard, he almost always takes a huge hit first. Le Triangle is an expensive Pokemon to keep around, considering the healing he gobbles up. But again, this is a reason that I actually like Generation 6. The low difficulty makes it not punishing to play around with weak species, so I'm gonna enjoy spamming blizzards and burning money on potions while I'm blessed with the opportunity. We work down to the basement where we meet a giant immortal homeless man who killed a bunch of Pokemon. What? This is so out of place. Let's sweep that under the rug. The final boss down here is Team Flare scientist Xerosic, against whom I built Shell Smash at home via O-Powers and sweep in 2 turns with Rock. O-Powers continue to be fun to use for dominating boss fights. And then a huge flower weapon blooms in Geosenge Town, and we're off to stop Team Flare more thoroughly over there. After another Lysander fight and several levels of 2 easy admin double battles, we gain access to Team Flare's ultimate weapon and a chance to fight the evil Yveltal. It gets a sick hatching cutscene, and then I trivially catch it on my first try with an O-Power buffed Quick Ball. Gosh, I love Quick Balls. Say hi to Dark Souls 2, who's destined to replace Microwave as our flying Pokemon. Pokemon Y even gives us a chance to add Yveltal directly to our team from the box, so I do that now. He ended up with a pretty bad nature, but I'm happy to have someone to hold Fly and Cut for me who doesn't really care about having other utility moves in the other slots. Then it's straight into yet another Lysander fight, but it sticks Dark Souls 2 at the front of our party to chew through my opponents, until Mega Gyarados makes me bring out Le Triangle. Actually, Mega Gyarados is easier to beat than regular because he loses the flying type, which activates a grass weakness. Lysander's mad he lost, so he takes a nap, then fires the missile anyway at itself, which comically knocks several Geosenge buildings on their side, and then the immortal homeless dude tries to make us feel sympathy for him, but he just isn't given enough screen time to pull that off. Little tip for writing, you need to do more work to earn a scene like this. We barely know this guy. Alright, it's back to progress on our league challenge, I guess. Route 18 is where Durant and Heatmore live. These poor species still locked to the endgame for their 3rd appearance in a row. Y'all, I was close to catching Heatmore as my horde encounter, but it's just not worth shaking up the team this late in the game. But hey look, I found where Abomasnow is good. At the inverse battle house where his million weaknesses become resistances. It's like he did the wrong math but came up with the correct answer here. And I will say I'm very happy to have a legendary Pokemon as my single Sky Battler now against this high-level 3-opponent trainer. This would not go well with only a Talonflame. It's optional to clear out Terminus Cave now for some strong TMs. This is the first place we can encounter Noibats, which is cool because even with its small Pokédex, X and Y did a good job spreading out new species through the late game. Oh, and Triangula finds another niche in here. His Auto Hail kind of circumvents Sturdy. I'm always happy for more ways to do that. And with both of their levels a little low relative to the team, I got a fair few chances to run Triangula and Dark Souls 2 as partners in double battles. They make a stylish pair. Once in Kuraway Town, Professor Sycamore catches us for a battle using all 3 fully evolved Kanto starters, but no Mega Evolution. Then Route 19 has friend fights against all of our group except Serena, before Shauna gifts us the Waterfall HM. Now, Waterfall gates more good loot in X and Y than it's ever gated before, but it's a shame we still don't have the badge to use it. I'm especially sad that 2 of the Waterfall gated TMs are strong rock moves that would go great against the coming Ice Gym. Well, Snowbell City holds that final gym, and it also holds a clothing shop that I buy out, styling a new outfit. I realized my old outfit was essentially a Yveltal cosplay, so I played around with some options until I came up with an Abomasnow outfit. Look, I just wish I had a white messenger bag. Before the Snowbell Gym, we've got to retrieve its itinerant leader from the Pokemon Village down the twisty forested Route 20. Trevenants, despite being a trade evolution Pokemon, are directly catchable here, which is extra weird because they're a new Gen 6 Pokemon. Usually Game Freak waits a few games before letting us circumvent trade Evo rules. And also weird is that Gourgeist is not catchable in the game, since that species is otherwise posed as a parallel to Trevenant. The discrepancy feels like an error on one side or the other. We can catch Zoroarks here, the first time they've been in the wild, as well as a Jigglypuff that we need for a trade. That goes to a woman in Snowbell for her Bisharp Pierce. He's level 50 with a perfect adamant nature but no item, and he's got Night Slash but no steel attack, which reduces his usefulness against fairies where you'd want him. Then the gym here is a colorful puzzle. Ice type is usually easy to punish, but I found my current team strangely under-equipped to punish it, lacking a real fighting or fire type. Rock has some support with Rock Tomb and Chobits with Mirror Shot, but Poisson with Flamethrower is once again my key to victory in here. Seviper just goes stupidly hard in Gen 6 with some attention paid to its speed stat. Wolfric gives us honest-to-goodness Ice Beam for winning, not some BS Powder Snow TM. And son of a gun, it's the first time that I don't even want it, cause Le Triangle is rocking Blizzard and Chobits has Dazzling Gleam. C'est la vie. Then we're directed to the Pokemon League by Wolfric, but we're also allowed to go back for a lot of great Waterfall loot, so let's start collecting that. I prioritize Route 22, where Waterfall gets me the Earthquake TM, which is strong and widely learned as always, but far from broken in this meta. It's mostly a counter for Klefkeys and Mawiles. On Route 15, we nab Dark Pulse, already known by Dark Souls 2, and up by the Frost Cavern, we finally collect Stone Edge for Rock, which also commits him to holding the wide lens from here on out. And in Kuraway Town, Waterfall gets us Rock Slide? Yeah, it's definitely a mistake that both of these Rock TMs are gated at the same instant by Waterfall. And this is really late for a game to give out Rock Slide, period. They must have been terrified it would just make that last Ice Gym too easy. You know, because we totally don't have Flamethrower and Brick Break TMs by then. We could nab Psychic down in the Pokemon Village, but walking there is annoying and I wouldn't use it, so that one can wait. So with the Waterfall TMs acquired, it's on to Route 21. The red flowers here contain Ursaring. That species hasn't had a real appearance outside of Johto, so I'm happy to see it get some love. Then as we head into a very long victory road, let's do as we always do and give the team report cards on their performance, noting that my feelings on everyone is warped this time by leaving the XP share on and having an easy run. First up, Peon Kennedy, who started with a grass move, which was nice, but he took forever to learn a second one. His slow speed kept him a little tougher to use all game, and then a total lack of fighting moves without spending a precious heart scale means his secondary fighting type really just served to add psychic weakness. He's like, fine, but I need to normalize grades a little, so I have to be harsh to Peon. C. Microwave is simple enough to rank. He met his job requirements all game, but never exceeded them. He was not a strong attacker until he learned Acrobatics, which does lose some points for the opportunity cost of having no held item. And he did eat a heart skill to become a real fire type. But high speed was nice to rely on, and I really like the flame body ability. Okay all around means he gets a straight B. Zorbux took forever to learn a water move above 40 base power. I have to give him credit for having a mega evolution, but he's just so boring. Earthquake does add some interesting coverage very late, and he's good for holding HMs, and there are a fair few fire opponents that he's good against, so I guess I have to give him an A-. Just wish he did something besides spam one water move. Walrider got a fair bit of use as my amulet coin boy. A good special tank and an excellent physical one, his only problem was a very plain offensive moveset. Return and headbutt only do so much. He's held back by a lack of coverage, but he is quite strong in the early game, B+. Poisson, you know I'm going to be biased towards. She gets some strong attacks early, in contrast to the suppressed power level of many other Pokemon this generation, with Bulldoze and later Flamethrower adding some nasty coverage. Medium speed and low defenses are of course the issues that I was able to ignore thanks to XP share levels, super training, and O powers. I mean, you saw her solo like 3 gyms. Poisson had game against way more of the meta than I expected and was just so fun to use on top. A. Rock is in a hard place. His ability boosts physical attacks, but he took his sweet time learning Razor Shell for water, and as already griped about, the strong rock moves were kept from him for way too long. That said, his attack is so good he was often still getting one-shots with Rock Tomb. X-Scissor and Shell Smash add a nice amount of utility, but he's weak as Binnacle, evolves pretty late, and the weirdness of his moveset drags him down. B. Chopitz is my darling. This Pokemon resists almost everything and hits back surprisingly well. It helps that Dazzling Gleam hits both opponents in double battles. Prankster Thunder Waves are sweet, and Leftovers plus Mirror Shot add further survivability against sturdier foes. In a game where they finally stopped giving Earthquake to every single opponent, the species shines even brighter. A+ for sure. I cannot pretend that Le Triangle is good in the slightest, even after putting him through a wide array of test battles catching him up to team level. There are so few opponents who don't have a super effective move against him, and also so few who don't outspeed him. Even with the Mega Evolution, he's too much of a liability to recommend for general use, but I'll let him claw back a couple of points, forgetting to spam Blizzard and for auto-hail finishing off fights sometimes. D+. And last is Dark Souls 2, who has 2 slots filled up with HMs. There aren't a lot of dark weak opponents in the game, but the Flying Oblivion Wing does do a lot of work. He loses more speed contests than I would expect, but his bulk and Oblivion Wing heals keep that from being a huge issue. If there were more Sky battles remaining, he'd be higher, but there aren't, so he earns a B+. Overall, I appreciate the team building diversity that the easier video game allowed me in Pokémon Y. I can run Seviper and Abomasnow and have them contribute in combat, and I didn't need to warp my team around Ice Beam for dragons thanks to having Dazzling Gleam. And I think the double water experiment worked out too, especially with one of them being a rock type and having mostly non-water moves that he wants to use anyway. Generation 6 reminds me at once of Gen 2 with its lower power level, and of Generation 4 with how the lower difficulty makes it easier to play with some less conventionally strong species. Moving on, Victory Road is absolutely huge here. It's definitely the longest one the series has had yet, and without counting, I suspect it's also got the most enemy trainers in it. Truly, this is the Lumiose city of Victory Roads. There's a Serena fight halfway through, not near the end like Victory Roads often have, and she's added an Altaria to her team. My big play this time was Poisson's Poison actually finishing off Jolteon. Poison status itself came up surprisingly few times for running a Poison Pokemon all game. Then we're in to face the Elite Four, who, like in Generation 5, allow us to choose the order. Our team is around level 71, which is crazy high after spending rare candies. Even without the XP share, this game has a relatively high level endgame. I took on the Fire Elite Malva first, Mega Zorbucks easily sweeping her team with Scald. I fought the Water-type Seabold second, which is a bit scary because the team never did catch a whiff of an electric move all run. But by now I had side-graded Triangula's Wood Hammer into Energy Ball using his higher special attack stat and also ditching the recoil damage. Given a free agility via O-Power, Triangula was able to sweep Seabold's first 3, but the final Gyarados does insist on Electric type, or Rock. Alas, he survives Rock's first Stone Edge, Dragon Dancing into Earthquake, but 2 can play the survive huge super effective attacks game, and Rock wins on turn 2, his wide lens low-key carrying. I fought Wickstrom the Steel type next because screw dragons, and I was terrified to find myself staring down an enemy Klefki to begin the fight. Flamethrower wasn't quite lethal, but it did serve to blow both of his full restores as he only managed to set up spikes. Then Probopass is not a good Poisson opponent, so I put in Zorbucks for that, a Scald Burn finishing him off in 1 turn even through Sturdy. Aegislash is tougher to kill, but Earthquakes did the job around some shielding nonsense, and I served Scizor back to Poisson for roasting. This game is probably the best that Fire type has felt in a while, or perhaps ever. That brings us to Drosna, the Dragon Elite, which I'd love to let Chobits handle, but Dragalge as a Dragon type actually has Triangle Snow written all over it. Her Noivern outspeeds me even with a speed O-Power, but mercifully the 4x Flamethrower was somehow not lethal and we beat her with Counter Snow. But she did look into burning me, so I do need to swap to Chobits to crush her Druddigon and Altaria, winning the fight almost at full health thanks to leftovers. Only the champion remains. League champion Diantha starts out dirty with a Swords Dance from Hawlucha, which could run away with the fight if Dark Souls 2 hadn't one-shot it right here. I passed Tyrantrum to a speed-powered Triangula, then she foolishly follows with Gudra for an Icy Death, and then with Auroras for an Energy Ball Death, and then Gourgeist for an Icy Death. Hold on, is this why they implemented Mega Abomasnow? Secret Diantha tech revealed? Alas, we won't know if Abomasnow could handle her Mega Gardevoir because I specifically chose Chobits to counter this Pokemon, and we're gonna let her do it. Resistant to both of Mega Gardevoir's on-type attacks, she's stuck Thunderbolting me for less than a third, leftovers buying me even more time as I wear her down with Mirror Shots through a full restore. Barely breaking a sweat, my little Keyring takes down the League Champion's Mega Evolved monster. Then me and my Aura-less 3 Quick Ball team is inducted into the Hall of Fame, and we get a very strange epilogue where the entire world celebrates our ascendance to champion before we crush the dirty hobo in a final battle. He remembers the power of love or something, and his also eternal Pokemon comes back to him. This would be touching if it wasn't so brief. Well, I've kept the yapping down short enough that we can squeeze the postgame into one video, and Pokemon Y has a postgame that I really enjoyed. Partially because it's short and sweet after a long campaign, and partially because it's different from prior ones. The postgames from Emerald all the way through Black and White 2 felt a little samey, kinda shotgun blasts of new content all crammed into a special new corner of the world that we couldn't access before the postgame began. We still get one new town, but most of the action takes place in the familiar Lumiose City. First though, we have some trades to do. Shauna meets us at our house after the credits to trade a bonus Froakie she hatched for any of our Pokemon. I ship her that dumb Lucario in exchange for Ferroble, level 5 with a Jolly Nature and no held item. And Diantha meets us in the same cafe where we originally encountered her to trade her Ralts for, again, any Pokemon. It's level 5 with perfect Modest Nature and holding its Mega Stone, though it only knows Growl at first. Now, before we start our post-game adventure, there is one change I'm going to make to the team. Not really for any strategic purpose, but because the XP share and reusable TMs make it easier than ever to change up the team, and when else am I going to get to use a Zygarde? So, returning to Terminus Cave, and the Master Ball easily adds Florida the Zygarde to the team, replacing Le Triangula. Florida's attack down nature is definitely not ideal, but he should still be fine at spamming Earthquakes. Mewtwo is accessible down in the Pokemon Village, so I debut Florida here to delete it. There are 2 more champion-only restaurants to eat at in Lumiose now. I ate/fought once at Restaurant Lowwow, but I didn't bother saving up the 500k to eat at the sushi place. Florida suppressing Dark Souls 2's Dark Aura is definitely anti-synergy, but placing him together so that Earthquakes won't hurt him was my real goal. Then, I ride the train to Cloud City, our one new post-game area. Its Poké Center sells some final cash TMs, and a girl hands out Flash Cannon for free, a nice upgrade for Chobits. Then there's one artist here who claims she can get out of her slump by seeing a boy in a vividly colored hat and shoes, so I change up my whole deal into a Seviper-inspired outfit with highly colored hat and sneakers, and the artist doesn't care. That does not fulfill the quest. I think her dialogue's just not written great. She wants a highly colorful outfit overall, not just your hat and shoes, so clearly my black jacket and pants ruined that. But I'm not changing again, this one's on the game. Then the game doesn't tell us we have to do this for the plot, but we do need to fight at least one round in the Battle Maison, this game's very scope-limited version of a Battle Frontier kind of place, in order to play the short post-game campaign. But that's okay because the Maison is good, and I actually had a lot of fun doing it. I chose to play double battles because those usually feel easier to gain an advantage when I haven't properly prepared my team, and with both of my legendaries banned, I guess that means everybody else gets to enter as my team. I set Chobits and Rock as my 2 leaders, and they did so well across 8 rounds that I think I only had to send out a 3rd Pokemon one time. Dazzling Gleam hitting both opponents, or Priority Thunderwave allowing Rock to go first in case there was ever an opponent who could threaten Chobits, was just very strong. So, after my dalliance in the Battle Maison, I mistakenly tried to visit Looker's new office in Lumiose City, not realizing that doing the Battle Maison had stealthily popped Serena into Cloud City for a final battle that we need to handle first. With her high levels here, my hubris was finally checked as Meowstic outsped to kill Poisson with Psychic. I wondered if I would ever stop getting away with that. Then, against her Mega Absol, Rock misses his first 2 Stone Edges all game long, back to back, which definitely feels like RNG rigging. But a single Dazzling Gleam handles this Balmung-looking Pokemon to win the fight. Serena hands us a bonus Absolite after the fight, a little late to care, and if we let Sycamore upgrade our Mega Ring now, there's a handful more Megastones we could collect in the postgame. I don't need them. So, now let's visit Looker's office and kick off a fun side story to close out the postgame that handles more like an anime episode or a traditional JRPG than a Pokemon game. Which isn't to call it a bad thing, I thought this was great. We are running all over Lumiose City on a goose chase, helping Looker establish his new crime-fighting agency with the help of a girl, Emma, who turns out to be the bad guy under the control of Team Flare's Xerosic. With a map of Lumiose City pulled up to guide me, it took about 2 hours end-to-end handling this little post-game episode, consisting of a large dungeon's worth of trainers, all rather easy fights up until the final showdown against Essentia. Her Pokemon here are just Xerosic's personal ones of a proper high level, but sadly still numbering only 2 for a fight that's over as soon as it begins. So, with a final boss that characteristically didn't even attempt to make itself difficult, Pokemon Y is now complete, played largely as the developers intended. This was my first time playing Pokemon X and Y, though Gen 6 with Alpha Sapphire was actually the first time I had been drawn back into the series since playing Gen 2 as a child. That was overwhelming at the time, but having the foundational understanding of Generations 3 through 5 under my belt this time helped soften the shock. I didn't want to pass judgment on if I liked the game or not before reaching the end of Pokemon Y, but oof, this is not the generation for me. I am definitely a Gen 5 truther, and I don't like how much of what I felt like was progress from Generation 5 got disregarded and thrown away in Gen 6. That feeling surfaces in a lot of little complaints that I feel I addressed plenty during the run, but it comes down to this game being overall not as fun to play. There's no challenge to it, and don't come at me for using the experience share that defaults to on. There's also O-Powers and Pokemon Ami, and none of those change the fact that boss fights should have more than 2 Pokemon in them. And as important as the battle design, the game is just sluggish to play. Many of the routes feel intentionally designed to slow the player down and waste our time, from repel-agnostic wild encounters and grass all over the roads, to deep swamps and rocky Rhyhorn rides. The rollerblades were a step in the right direction of making it feel nice to get around the game world, but they're lost in a sea of other negatives for me. Mega Evolutions are fine. They very clearly break combat balance, and I happen to visually be kind of cynical about them. They do kind of just look like a 10-year-old added spikes to everything. But they're not more of a balance break than Pokemon Ami or O-Powers or the XP share. I think they belonged in an extra difficult game where it would make sense to actually need them rather than the easy game that X and Y is. And there were more small issues with the game that felt like actual design mistakes than ever, like HM-gated trainers being at the wrong levels, Trevenant but not Gourgeist being catchable, the double rock TMs both gated by waterfall, and insanely stacked sky battles. So I didn't have a great time playing Pokemon Y, but to be fair, let's acknowledge what it did good as well. The new fairy type felt very balanced to me. They integrated it throughout the game rather than dangling it as some overpowered special type just for the post-game, and it never felt dominant. Really, it felt more like a needed buff to poison and steel types rather than announcing itself too loudly, and it also managed to make dragons less annoying. I have praise for fairy type all around. then this is a pretty big deal for me personally. X and Y has pretty smooth menus and UI. I didn't keep a big list of specific tweaks because frankly the effort to compile that isn't worth it to me or you, but fiddling around in the menus both in and out of combat felt snappier and smoother than it has since the Game Boy Advance games. Regarding the easier difficulty, I don't think it's a bad thing, and it might actually be a good thing the way that it works following Black and White 2, which were tough by contrast. It allowed me to worry less about power level when choosing Pokemon for the team, which in turn let me explore the game's other mechanics more thoroughly. Speaking of, I did love O-Powers. Maybe if they were capped at 1 stage stat boost instead of letting me get a free Swords Dance, and less easy to spam, they could be balanced better, but I did enjoy the strategic pre-application of stat boosts before boss fights. Plus, I thought overall the meta was very fun. Obviously, Poison and Steel type got to feel strong, but for the first time in a long time, Fighting type wasn't very dominant, and not every foe had Earthquake by the endgame to ruin our use of Rock and Steel types, and I always think it's a good game when Water Roots and Trainers are kept to a minimum. My point is not specifically that X and Y have a great metagame, but just that I'm happy it continues to change from game to game to allow different types to feel like the strong ones. And obviously, Klefki is a highlight. Whew. Thanks for watching my video. I've got a whole long Pokemon playlist that's great for binging, so stick around for more and add your subscription if you want to catch new content as it comes out. I do have a big move coming up, so upload speed will take a hit for a while, but grant me a bit of grace and we'll be up and running again quickly to continue playing through the series as intended and mixing in some fun challenge runs too. Thank you as always to my patrons for your support of the channel. I appreciate you all for helping me make nice long videos like this, despite the ups and downs of video performance. And that's all I've got for now. I'll see you before long when we travel back to Hoenn. Mothy out.